We want to especially thank our guest, Rob, for making the visit for us today. Rob Samborn is a novelist, a screenwriter, entrepreneur, and a native New Yorker. He's also an avid traveler who has been to 40 countries, lived in 5 of them, and studied 9 languages. He lived in Los Angeles for 20 years and now makes his home in Denver with his wife, his daughter, and his dog. Please welcome Rob Samborn.
Thank you, Yvette, and thank you to everybody who has shown up tonight. Good evening or afternoon, depending upon where you are. Thank you all for coming. A huge thanks to the Rogers Memorial Library for hosting this event, and I'm super excited to be here. Again, I'm Rob Samborn, author of The Prisoner of Paradise. If you're not familiar with it, this is the book here. And so tonight I'm going to be doing a reading followed by a presentation about Venice. So the book does take place in Venice. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to do that. And then followed by a Q&A if anybody has any questions. So I'm going to get going with the reading, and I'll set it up because I'm not actually going to start in the beginning. But the book starts off in 1589, the year 1589 in Venice, outside the Jewish Ghetto at night. And we meet a swordsman named Angelo, who is desperate to save his beloved Isabella. He's with an unnamed nobleman who's aiding him. And before Angelo finds out what happened to Isabella, they're attacked by a group of men who are a part of a mysterious order, and the nobleman takes his own life rather than be captured. Angelo escapes, promising vengeance. The book then flash forwards all the way to the present day in Venice, and we meet the main characters, who are Nick and Julia O'Connor. They're 2 28-year-old Americans on vacation, combined with a work trip for Julia. She's an emerging fine arts photographer, and she has a piece in the Venice Biennale, which is one of the world's largest art exhibitions going on right now, actually. And that's real. And so Nick is a software architect, and he also plays amateur hockey. And about 3 weeks before their trip, he suffered a serious head injury on the ice, but was still cleared to go for the trip by his doctor. However, since they arrived, he's been experiencing odd episodes of disorientation, vertigo, and even hallucinations. He's tried to hide it all from Julia to make sure that they have a great trip. They go to a place called the Palazzo Du Collet, or Doge's Palace, which is one of the top attractions in Venice. It's a huge building on the edge of St. Mark's Square. It's about 800 years old. Now it's a museum, and but at one point it was the seat of government for the Venetian Republic, which used to be the world's largest maritime power. So that's the setup, and we're about to get into it. This is chapter 4. Okay, so Julia led Nick from the ticket counter into the palazzo's courtyard as raindrops began to fall. They ducked under a portico where Julia perused her digital guidebook. "Hey, check this out," she said, referencing the tablet. "Casanova was once imprisoned here." "Casanova? I never knew he was in prison. He managed to escape in 1757. Must have had a hot date. Guy's my idol." Nick winked at his wife. "Says the faithfully married man. What can I say? I wooed and won the hottest chick. I'm gonna keep her." He planted a kiss on her lips. Julia's enthusiasm was contagious. He loved this place. They hurried beneath an archway at the far end of the courtyard, where Julia gaped at the giant staircase. The marble flight led to the interior building entrance, flanked by 10-foot-tall statues of Mars and Neptune, the Roman gods of war and the sea, forever protecting Venice. A sculpture of a large face embedded in the bottom of the staircase stared at them with angry eyes beneath heavy brows. Its open mouth revealed a thick tongue. "This must be the Bocca della Verità, or mouth of truth," she continued to read aloud. "Venetians used to place denunciations against wayward citizens in the mouth." Nick bent down to the marble face. "Nick O'Connor is a head case who should be drawn and quartered, or tarred and feathered, or whatever you guys did back then." He straightened and patted himself. It's not working. I'm still here." "They put written notes into it, honey. They didn't yell at it." She tucked the iPad under her arm and grabbed the camera hanging around her neck. She'd yet to have a photo of herself in Venice, and Nick sensed she felt self-conscious about asking him to take one. Other than the occasional cell phone shot, Julia was always the photographer and Nick the subject. Solo shots of Nick heavily weighted the pictorial of their lives. He made a mental note to change that. "Say, hey, a Venice," she said with a New York Italian accent. "Hey, a Venice," Nick managed while cracking up. Julia took the photo and checked the LCD as a few drops landed on the screen. "What do they do with these so-called wayward citizens?" He tilted his face into the rain for a quick refresher. "Good question. Why do you say so-called?" "I don't know," Nick shrugged. "Maybe they threw them into the dungeon." He reached for her waist, pulling her to him. "I'd like to get you in a dungeon. Some fuzzy handcuffs." "Okay, Casanova, let's get inside." "Definitely. I need to see this life-changing art." 90 minutes later, after visiting rooms once devoted to the now defunct Venetian Republic, Nick and Julia rounded a corner and headed for another door. The day had quickly stretched long, and a bunch of old furniture and paintings weren't Nick's idea of excitement, though he had to admit he found the art, antiques, and arms fascinating. The swords in particular intrigued him, especially the various styles of dueling weapons. The whole complex, with its intricate interior and vaulted ceilings, cast an ambiance of a bygone world. "This," Julia said as they stepped through the open door, "is the great council room where the doges and senators met. Sort of the Congress of its day. It's 14,000 square feet. You could fit our apartment in here a dozen times over." At least 75 other tourists ambled about. Other than the floor and windows, the entire hall, including the ceiling, was decorated with gilded framed Renaissance paintings of Venetian life, battles, and noblemen, each masterpiece more magnificent than the next. Above Nick, around him, everywhere, rich detail blended in a kaleidoscope of pigment and gold, setting him in awe. He pivoted to the wall they entered through. "Holy!" His breath caught in his throat. A colossal painting of a horde of people blanketed the wall. At the top center were Jesus and the Virgin Mary, backlit by a glorious, otherworldly light. Below them, men, women, and children, people of all walks of life, clambered over one another. Because of the fluidity of the brushstrokes, Nick couldn't determine if the worshipers were enraptured or trying to reach their savior in a reverent stampede. Below the work, two double doors dwarfed by the scene bookended a large wooden stage rising 3 feet off the floor, with a broad 5-step staircase and a long velvet rope forbidding access. At the rear of this dais, against the wall, 7 red oak chairs lined with gold trim were assembled like sentinels. Faux ionic columns separated the chairs, with the middle chair sitting slightly higher than the other 6. The painting covered the remaining wall, all the way to the top of the 40-foot ceiling. "There must be hundreds of people up there," Julia said. "Thousands," Nick murmured. It wasn't the sheer size that captivated him, but the content. Struggling to take it all in, he backed up to get a better view. The mammoth scale and visceral power made it impossible to observe the whole thing from a single spot. "There are people painted behind people and more behind them." "Mesmerizing," Julia said. "What does the guidebook say?" This is the first time since the courtyard he expressed real interest, and yet, for a reason he couldn't pinpoint, he worried his atypical request for more detail about a single painting came across as eager. Julia smiled and skimmed through her iPad, all too happy to oblige. "Well, it's called Il Paradiso, which means the paradise, which I probably could have figured out. Painted by Jacopo Tintoretto. It depicts the crowning of Mary in heaven. It's the only artwork in this room with solely religious content. All those people are a who's who from the Bible, modeled on a who's who of Venetian society back in the day. It's 74 by 30 feet and is the largest oil painting ever created. It's actually a canvas." Julia looked up. "I wonder why he didn't paint on the wall." As she spoke, a great sense of calm enveloped Nick, unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Though viewing paradise in its entirety required backing up, Nick stepped forward to explore the intricacies. He drew in a long breath, exhaled across his fingers, and raised his gaze from the base of the painting to the top, studying the faces. Julia joined him and began reading again. "The work's naturalistic strength," what's the painter's name? Tinto what now? "Tintoretto. Tell me about him. You're lucky I studied art history." "I'm lucky I have you, period." She grinned. He was a Renaissance great, schooled, I think, by Titian, though a rival of his and Veronese's. She thought to herself for a moment. That's all I got out of that class, she said, going back to the iPad. A bit of an oddball, a loner, and he painted in total secrecy. Super religious, too. He died 6 years after starting Paradise. Get to the part about the people, all these faces. Julia swiped through. Like I said, they're supposed to be from the Bible, but some are modeled after citizens who wanted to be immortalized. There are so many. It's like a Jackson Pollock of people. They look so real. Nick couldn't stop gawking at it. Let's get a shot of you in front of it. Me? You're not allowed to take pictures in here. Nobody will notice, and my cell phone won't cut it. He took the camera off her back. Come on, we're getting some quality shots of you on this trip. Julia nervously eyed a security guard engaged with a group of French-speaking tourists while Nick positioned himself for the shot. He steadied the camera's LCD. Hold still, gorgeous. Pressing the shutter button halfway down, the lens whirred. The red square framed Julia's face. The painting blurred in the background. The depth of field shifted, blurring Julia and bringing the artwork into focus. Then, above Julia's right shoulder, he saw it. A slight movement. What the hell? Nick looked up and blinked twice. He shook his head and again focused on Julia in the LCD. Again, an indistinct motion behind her. Babe, did you get the shot? Julia called in a loud whisper. Nick zoomed in on the hundreds of people. Some faces were serene, some drawn with longing, others with rapture. A singular face in the painting's bottom left came into focus. A woman, auburn hair pulled back, dark eyes accentuated by her flushed skin. The rouge on her cheeks enhanced her pining expression. Her eyes told a story of innocence and yet desire. Nick's breathing shallowed. Dio cantante! A female voice screamed in Nick's head. He stumbled from the force of the spasm knifing into his skull. Dio cantante! The voice shrieked again. The sting sharpened, knocking Nick to his knees. The camera slipped from his grasp and dropped to the floor. His fingers pressed into his temples to squeeze out the words, swirling amidst serrated darts of mental pain. A tidal wave of ice deluged Nick's flesh, followed by a lightning flash of intense heat that scorched his core. No, Paul, it's sad. Nick, my camera. Crashing back to reality, Nick spotted Julia frantically pointing. He followed her eyes and glimpsed her object of attention, a rail-thin man in a black t-shirt slipping through the rear exit with Julia's Nikon gripped in his hand. Any trace of Nick's disorientation evaporated as his adrenaline kicked in. No one stole from his wife and got away with it. He didn't hesitate. Nick bolted after the thief, tripped, and smacked his head against the cold marble floor. Instant agonizing wooziness preceded a sharp ringing. His vision wavered. The room spun like a ship caught in a whirlpool. Clutching his forehead, he rolled onto his back. His head drooped to the side, affording him a clear angle of paradise. The individuals in the painting detached from one another, like broken jigsaw puzzle pieces, speeding toward or away from him while maintaining their petrified two-dimensional painted positions. The room's walls and ceilings dissolved into space. Succumbing to the miracle unfolding before him, Nick's data-driven mind repressed any rationale for it. He staggered to his feet and took a tentative step, breathed in the air, and marveled at his surroundings. He stood in St. Mark's Square, the same plaza he'd toured not 2 hours earlier, but a quainter version of it. There was no modern technology, no amplified sounds. A church that no longer existed in the present day stood prominently at the opposite end. All the people wore Renaissance-era clothing, and like the figures from Paradise hovering around him, everything and everyone in the square other than Nick was two-dimensional, like a diorama, yet seemed so alive. Though nobody's face or mouth moved, distinct Italian conversations encompassed him. Dio cantante, Nick heard again. The auburn-haired woman's likeness appeared directly in front of Nick. Her face angled toward him, but her eyes remained fixed. Honey, you're white as a ghost, it said. Julia's face swayed in and out of his vision, like a physical object interfering with a holographic projection. She crouched over him and lifted his head. The walls and ceilings reappeared. The painting snapped back into place. The woman's pupils dilated with distress. The painting, a woman, Nick stammered. Julia responded, but he couldn't hear her. A woman in the painting is talking to me. Chapter 5. Sir, can you hear me? The faint question laden with a thick Italian accent snaked through the dull ache in Nick's brain. He opened his eyes. A powerfully built man in his mid-40s with a buzz cut, soft eyes, and a pugilist's face loomed over him. He wore a navy blue suit with one sleeve fastened at the elbow in place of a missing limb. Nick presumed him to be a security guard, though not a low-level one. Julia, her face fraught with worry, cradled Nick's head in her lap. He moved to sit up. No, Nick, stay still. We've called for help. Julia held her hand on his shoulder to keep him down. 3 college students saddled with backpacks and selfie sticks converged for a closer look. One student clicked a selfie with Nick. Nick grimaced and shielded his face. I'm all right, he said, getting to his knees. Your camera, Nick. Sorry I let him get away, Jules. I must have slipped or something. Nick, you said the painting talked to you. What? It's probably jet lag. He squeezed out a smile, which faded when a frown crossed one armed man's face. Yes, perhaps your husband needs to get back to your hotel for some rest, the man said, helping him up. This guy's right. That's exactly what I need, Nick said. The guard pressed his finger to his earpiece. See? He listened a moment before nodding pleasantly to Nick and Julia. Ah, bene. They caught the thief outside the palazzo. They brought him and your camera to the police station. It's not far. So I'm going to stop here and tell you a little bit more about it. So from here, Julia and Nick's trip rapidly devolves into basically the world's worst vacation. So while Julia worries her husband has a serious brain injury, Nick is adamant the voice was real. And he goes on a quest to learn more and discovers not only was she a real person, but she was his soulmate from a past life. He also discovers an ancient order that over hundreds of years has developed a method of extracting people's souls from their bodies. And they trap those souls in the Paradise painting as a purgatory of sorts. And they claim all of the hundreds of souls are evil. So Nick will do anything to free his long-lost beloved, but freeing her means freeing all the souls, and the Order will never let that happen. So that's pretty much the book. I hope that you enjoyed the reading. If you haven't read it, I hope that you would like to read it. And I would thank you if you do, and of course, thank you if you have read it. So now I have a presentation about places in Venice that appear in the book, which I can dive into. I'm going to do a Q&A at the end, unless anybody has any burning questions right now. You can click on the chat if you have any questions, or I believe you can also raise your hand somehow. So, excuse me. So nope. Okay, cool. So I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully everybody can see that. If you can't, drop a comment in the chat. And great. So as everybody around the world knows, Venice is one of basically the top cities really to see the world. I mean, it's an absolutely remarkable place if you haven't been there. The city itself is about 1,000 years old. It used to be the capital of the Venetian Republic, which at one point was the largest maritime power in the world. And it was a republic separate from Italy for about 1,000 years until I believe 1929, when Italy unified. So fairly recently, really. And the city was built, it's entirely man-made. It's an island city that was built on a swamp. And the entire city is resting on millions of logs that are pylons that have since petrified now and support all these marble buildings. And there's no motorized transportation. The only way to get around really is either by boat or walking. You can't even really ride a bike there because it's basically impossible because you're constantly hitting water and the whole city is like a maze. So the city itself, honestly, is a tourist attraction in its own right. And so much of the book is Nick and Julia and other characters going through this maze of a city, getting lost in the labyrinth. But of course, there are major spots that I want to talk about. So what we have here is the Palazzo Du Collet, or Doge's Palace. And this is one of the top attractions in Venice. And this is where what I just read takes place. So it's located on the edge of St. Mark's Square. St. Mark's Square is the largest square in Venice. It's huge. It's filled with like shops and cafes, and there's bands that play. It's great. So this is right on the edge of that. It's right next to St. Mark's Basilica, which is a Byzantine cathedral. That's also an attraction as well. It does not appear in the book. This particular building was constructed in 1340 and was the former seat of power for the Venetian Republic. It became a museum in 1923. The building itself is phenomenal, and then there's some attractions within the building or just outside of it, including the Bridge of Sighs, which is a bridge that prisoners had to cross through. So the building not only was a seat of power, but also housed prisons for pretty much any type of criminal, from political prisoners to the most hardened criminals. And they would have to cross this bridge called the Bridge of Sighs, and people could actually see them crossing as they went into pretty horrible conditions that you'll see in a moment. There's also the Mouth of Truth that I spoke about before, where Venetians would place letters, denunciations against other citizens in the mouth. And then this group called the Council of 10 would read these denunciations and potentially then round up the people and hold them for questioning. There's also the giant staircase, which is in the courtyard, that's flanked by these gigantic statues of the Roman gods Mars and Neptune. Inside the building is the golden staircase, which is this huge staircase that's completely covered in gold leaf. And then finally is another, I shouldn't say finally, but another major attraction is the Great Council Room. Now, this is the room in which that scene just took place. And you can see in the far back here, that wall, that is the painting Paradise. And you can kind of get the scale of it next to the people standing here. And keep in mind that this person here in the blue coat is probably a good 20 feet from the wall, and also maybe about 15 feet from the bottom of the painting. And you can also see the doors there. That open door, that would probably fit maybe 2 or 3 people side by side. So above that, you can see it's so big, they had to make it seem that like these doors were actually doors when they're not. That's how big it is. It's absolutely gigantic. The room itself, as you heard in the reading, is 14,000 square feet. This was once the largest room in all of Europe. And it was basically the Congress of its day. So it's where all the Venetian senators met for government business. And the entire room is filled head to toe with different masterpieces, not only by Tintoretto, but also Titian, Veronese, and many other Venetian masters. And you can't exactly see it too well here, but there's a ring that goes around the whole room on the other 3 walls that is filled with portraits of all the different doges from the past 1,000 years. And there's one particularly interesting one of a doge named Marino Faliero, whose portrait is covered completely with a black shroud. That particular doge was found to be guilty of a coup d'etat, and the citizens hated him so much that they actually mutilated him and burned his body and records of his existence, and then covered his painting in the room. Sight to see. Part of the Doge's Palace that you can see, you can take tours. If you ever go, one tour that I highly recommend is called the Secret Itineraries tour. That is very, very interesting. So you really go into the bowels of this building. You see the prison cells, and there's 2 different types called the pozzi and the piombi. which are known as the wells or just the lead. The wells were called that because they were these horrible condition cells that were just very dark with nothing but like a hole in the wall for air. The piombi were slightly better, and they were called that because they all had a lead ceiling. You could also see Casanova's cell, which is pretty cool. I think he was in there around 1750-ish or something like that. There's also a room called the Chamber of Torment. So this tour is not for the faint of heart, of course, but it's still very interesting. So the Chamber of Torment, and this does play, some of these places do play a part in the book. The Chamber of Torment is a torture room. There's also the Chamber of the Secret Chancellery and the Chamber of the Inquisitors, two other rooms where government officials or members of the Council of 10 that I mentioned before would question people if they were accused of a crime. This particular tour is $30 per person, but you definitely should book in advance because it often sells out. Then going to a different building, this one is called the Scuola Grande di San Roco, or the Great School of St. Roque, which was a confraternity of, let's just say, of artisans founded in 1478, filled with all master painters and sculptors and other types of artisans, dedicated to St. Roque, who was often invoked against the plague. So, of course, Venice was no stranger to plagues of all sorts, especially bubonic plague and even COVID, but this going back hundreds of years. This building is very interesting because many secret meetings were held here. It does play a prominent role in the book. It was also a rival of a number of other great schools. There were all these different great schools in Venice throughout the years. Tintoretto was a major member of this particular school. So the room that you're looking at here is called the chapter room. This is another one where the ceiling is completely decorated with paintings. And by the way, in both rooms, these paintings are actually canvases, which is really interesting. So they're mounted in the ceiling. And in this particular museum, it's really cool because they give you mirrors for you to look up at the painting so you don't have to crane your neck. Another room in this building is called the Sala del Albergo, which is the location of Tintoretto's Crucifixion, which is arguably one of his other masterpieces. He has maybe 2 or 3 or 4 that are considered the great works of all time, including Paradise. The Crucifixion is a really interesting painting. It is about, of course, the crucifixion, but while most paintings of the crucifixion are really hyper-focused on Jesus on the cross, this particular one, it looks almost like an establishing shot that would have been taken by like a drone or a camera on a crane. There's probably 75 people in it. It's also a huge painting. It's not quite as big as Paradise, but it's probably about 30 feet wide by 20 feet high. And you see everything that's going on. And it's really an action shot. They're raising the cross at the time, and there's lots of other things going on in this painting. And it's actually one of the paintings that really inspired the book for me. There's also art by a lot of other Renaissance greats, namely Titian, Tiepolo, and more. And another one I want to point out is a sculptor named Pianta, and he has allegorical sconces that are actually in this room. It's a little hard to see. He also did these lights, which are these gigantic bulb-shaped lanterns. And between each one of the lamps, sort of you can see what, like these little shapes here. These are wooden sculptures that seem like and behind it are wooden panels, and they feel like they're birthed from the wood. Each one is an individual, and it's an allegorical scene of different things, and it goes all the way around the room. It's really cool. And that also plays a part in the book. Here is a picture of the Jewish Ghetto. So this is the world's oldest ghetto, and also the origin of the word from about 500 years ago. It's walled in. It used to be gated. The book starts outside the wall alongside a canal. And then, so Jews were actually treated comparatively well in Venice, but it was originally gated. And they only opened the gates at certain times. Napoleon, actually, in his invasion of Venice, was the person who took down the gates in 1797. And now the synagogues are open to the public, but only as part of guided tours, unless you're a member. Now, flashing forward all the way to the present is the Venice Biennale. So this is one of the world's biggest and most important art exhibitions. It's been going on since 1895. Of course, Venice is just completely filled with classical art, but they also wanted to really bring out modern art too and promote it. So the Venice Biennale is all about modern art, which is really interesting. And not only modern, but I mean, I'm talking contemporary and art that just like pushes the boundaries. We want stuff that really makes people think and is very innovative. It's currently going on right now and is running through November 21st. This plays a huge part in the book because, as I mentioned, Julia is a fine arts photographer and has a piece in the Biennale. It's a huge international thing. There are 29 international pavilions. And what's really interesting and great is that 2022 is the majority of the artists are female artists, which is really interesting. That's the first time in history. Now, just going to some other sites in the book and places. The Bauer Hotel is where Julia and Nick stay. It's an amazing, just absolutely gorgeous hotel, luxury hotel that's right on the Grand Canal. The Grand Canal is sort of the Broadway of Venice. It's the biggest canal that goes right through the city. It's a perfect location if you're looking for someplace to stay. It's located right in San Marco, which is the name of the neighborhood where St. Mark's Square and all these other attractions are, not the Biennale, but it's 2 minutes from the Doge's Palace. Another very interesting option is the Hotel Metropole, which is also in the book. And then finally is Poveglia Island, which I haven't mentioned yet, but plays a part in the book as well. Now, this place is not in Venice City, and it's also not for the intrepid traveler because it's not open to the public. It's 3 miles by Venice, but is a very, very interesting place for historical research. You know, if you're interested in any type of history, so much happened here. It was really important. So it was originally a plague quarantine station. And fun fact, the word quarantine actually comes from the Venetian dialect word quarantina, which means 40, which is how many days people had a quarantine on boat when there was plague going on. They had a quarantine on boat when they got in for 40 days. So a lot longer than we would have to quarantine now. And even masks and everything, social distancing, all of that, everything that we're doing for COVID comes from Venice from hundreds of years ago. So it's kind of interesting. After it was a plague quarantine station, it later became a mental institution. And access is forbidden here, but you are allowed, you not allowed, I mean, you can hire people to take you there and tour it. And it's kind of ruins. And a lot of people died there. And it is supposed to be the most haunted island in the world. And Nick does go there. I think there's some fun scenes in Poveglia Island. So that is that. We will have a Q&A, but first of all, thank you so much. So again, I'm Rob Samborn. If you want to check out my website, it's robsamborn.com. If you want to email me, author@robsamborn.com. If you're on social media, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, if you're on TikTok, and LinkedIn. My username at all of them is Rob Samborn. And then on Facebook, it's Rob Samborn, author. There may be an underscore there, but everything is on my website. And I'm going to stop sharing now and open it up to questions. So Yvette, I'm not sure how we should do the questions. People can write it in the chat, I suppose, or I guess we can unmute people.
Yeah, I'm guessing the chat, I just was running over to the computer, but I think you have access to see too. But I wanted to just see if anyone was writing anything.
And of course, questions about anything, about the book, about Venice, if there are any writers online and you have any questions about writing. Did you write from Denver or Venice or both? So thank you to Kim McLaren for that question. So again, the question is, did you write from Denver or Venice or both? I did take, so really, I guess you could say both. And I should actually point out a couple of other things about that. So thank you, that's a great question. So most of this book was actually written in LA. I wrote it all really before moving to Denver. And then, so I have an agent, and my agent submitted to publishers, and I have a 3-book deal actually with my publisher, who is Touchpoint Press. And the book was originally supposed to come out a little earlier, but because of COVID got pushed and came out on November 30th of 2021. The second book is actually coming out very soon in the fall, and that is called Painter of the Damned. There is a new title for those of you who have read it. There's a bonus scene in the back of the first book that was called The Painter Paradise, but it's now called Painter of the Damned. In fact, you should follow me on social media, because I'm going to be starting to do a cover reveal on Friday, and I am extremely excited about this cover. I'm in love with the cover of Painter of the Damned. It's really, really amazing. And also, I did take a research trip to Venice for the first book. So I did do some writing in Venice. So in answer to your question, I primarily wrote the book in LA. I did do a little bit of writing on the research trip in Venice, and then I did do editing in Denver, and then the entire second book was written in Denver, and the entire third book will be written in Denver as well. And let's see. So another question from Andre Fluet. What about the painting inspired you to write the book? Thanks, Andre, for that question, and that's a great question. So really, there's a couple things. So first off, I've always been fascinated with the concept of soulmates, or I shouldn't say really soulmates, but the connections that people have with each other that go beyond physical attraction or shared likes and interests. You know, I think a lot of people who are lucky enough anyway have experienced this, where you just feel this connection with other people. Sometimes it could be immediate, right? So it's like, what causes that? So I've always wanted to write about that and explore that subject. And on a trip to Venice, I saw that painting, The Crucifixion, actually was really what inspired it, Before Paradise. And I was just blown away by the number of people in this painting. I mean, besides the Tintoretto's technique and everything, and like I was talking before about how it looks like this establishing shop, besides that, every single person in this painting looks like an individual portrait. And they're from all walks of life, all ages, everything. So I was thinking, you know, obviously I've known that artists use models still to this day. But I was thinking, you know, I mean, did he have a line of people? And you look at something like Paradise, there's like hundreds of people. And besides that, all the other people. So did he have a line of people outside his door? Probably not. So I was thinking, okay, who were these people that really got immortalized? They truly are immortalized. I mean, they're still there now. And then I was thinking, okay, maybe it was their souls that were captured from their bodies and put into it. And so then I decided to marry those two concepts and create the book. So Kim asked another question. Where is the book set, or is it a continuation? Very glad you asked that question. You can actually read it as a standalone because it catches people up in the beginning, but it is indeed a continuation. It's a sequel. So without spoiling what happens in the first, we do find out what happens to Nick and Julia, and it takes place primarily in Venice as well, but they do leave Venice again. I don't think I'm spoiling it here, and they end up going to Madrid. And why Madrid? Because this is also pretty interesting. Tintoretto painted 3 versions of Paradise. The first 2 were studies that he did, and those studies are also enormous. And I mean, the scale of doing something like that is insane, because you know, imagine painting just like 2 huge paintings that you're not even planning on using, but those are in museums. So the one in Madrid is in a museum called the Thyssen-Bornemisza, which is a phenomenal museum, and the other one's actually in the Louvre in Paris. So we find out So this order, the ancient order of the seventh son that controls the painting in Venice, is extremely powerful and extremely wealthy, and they basically control Venice. And they're also run by a corrupt head who is very, very power hungry. And we find out that it's much bigger than Venice. So they have a chapter in Spain and then also one in France. And the head of the order has his sights on a lot more power, you can say. So it becomes a little bit more, or much more, of a thriller. We have any other questions?
I saw, oh, I was just wondering, I saw someone, I wasn't sure if they were trying to raise their hand. It was a Jean Mahoney. I don't know if that was a mistake. So if it is Jean, I'm sorry, but if not, if you wanted, you could unmute and ask your question. May have been a mistake.
No, now it's on mute. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's faint
Okay.
though.
Can you hear me now?
I can, yeah.
Okay, my question was it a visit to the city of Venice or a view of the painting that inspired you first?
That's a great question. So again, you know, I've always been fascinated with the idea of soulmates or that kind of connectivity. And I would say it was really a view of the painting that inspired this particular story. But Venice itself, in my opinion, you know, there's a story lurking around every corner, under every bridge, at the bottom of every canal, you know, in every building. It's just one of those places that's both beautiful and mysterious at the same time. So really, I mean, honestly, I'm going to say it's both, because Venice is itself a major character in the city. I mean, it revolves around the painting, but the city itself plays a huge part. So I would say it's both.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question.
Yeah. We love Venice. It's magic.
Have you seen the painting, Paradise?
Yes. Yeah.
Great.
But you brought a lot of new insight to it. Go back and look at it again. We did a tour by ourselves, so we didn't have anybody explaining, like, you know, the content and stuff.
We didn't get the mirrors.
Right. The mirrors are in the other building, in the Scuola di Grande di San Roco.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm one of those people who often rarely takes tours as well. You know, I like to kind of just discover things on my own. But I think it's definitely worth taking tours in Venice, because there are things that you just, you know, guidebooks aren't going to say, especially if you get it from a local. You know, where there's just things that you might miss. These little things, you know, it's just like, because the city, as you know, is just so cramped, and so much has happened in such a small space over such a long period of time, that, you know, there's just like these nooks and crannies where you learn really interesting tidbits.
Yeah. So interesting.
Yeah. So, does anybody else have any other questions? Nope. Okay.
Joanne here. I read your book 4 times. And the first time you wrote it, the first draft, there was a different ending. And I can't wait to get my hands again on the book. We've got 2 copies of your book. We're a little biased. How different is the ending from the first to the published book?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. It's dramatically different, actually. So I'm not going to reveal the original ending, because that would spoil the current ending. But both the original ending and also the original beginning are very different. And I think the current way it is definitely better. And I do credit my amazing agents, Kimberly Brower and Amy Ashcroft, for those decisions. We worked on it quite a bit, and really tried to make it the best it could possibly be. So yeah, in answer to your question, it is pretty different. Yeah.
To tell you the truth, I really didn't like the ending of the first book. I was devastated by it, actually. Absolutely heartbroken. And I won't, of course, get into it, but I'm glad that I can't wait to get my hands on it now to read exactly what the new ending is, because I was just so devastated by the last one, you know, your first draft. Anyway, congratulations, and thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it, and your dad appreciate it. I think he's watching at home on Zoom. Okay, I'll tell him you did a great job.
Okay, so does anybody else have any other questions?
Yeah, I'm here, actually. I had one question. Did you actually go to the island?
Poveglia?
Yeah, Poveglia.
No, I wish. Unfortunately not, but it's on my bucket list to go. I think it would be pretty interesting.
And in front of Poveglia, there's a little small island. Do you know what that is? Is that just part of the port?
Yeah, it's part of the port. Yeah.
And
And by the way, if anybody would like a copy of that presentation, email me and I'll send it to you if you're going to Venice or anything like that. I mean, it's obviously a very short little thing, and there's a million guidebooks and websites and things about Venice, but if you'd like it, I'd be more than happy to send it to you. You can email me at author@robsamborn.com.
Great. We can send it.
Rob, I just want to say, I have never seen anyone weave in the extra information when they talked about a book, and I actually thought that was pretty brilliant.
Thank you.
Really, that was brilliant, having the presentation and weaving that in. It kind of was like a place marker for the book. I just thought that I've never seen that done.
Cool.
In 16 years of being here and having authors. I thought that was brilliant.
Thanks.
That's just my personal thought.
Glad you like it. I've actually never done it before. So
Really great. I don't know why every author should do that. It's really great, and it kind of makes you want to get into the book more. I thought that was great.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thanks, Yvette. I'm glad that you like that. So, all right. Are there any other questions? No? Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for coming. It really means so much to me for everyone who showed up. I also want to thank Rogers Memorial Library for hosting. Special thanks to Yvette Postel for putting this wonderful event together. My book is available at the library, as well as for purchase at all the usual suspects. By the way, if you like ebooks, the Kindle book is on sale right now for a limited time for $2.99. You can also sign up for my newsletter at robsamborn.com or follow me on social media. Again, it's usually Rob Samborn. And the audiobook, by the way, is coming out on August 8th, I believe, sometime in August. And again, the sequel to The Prisoner of Paradise, which is called The Painter of the Damned, is coming out in the fall, late October or early November. And again, you'll probably want to follow me on social media if you're interested in Painter of the Damned, because I'm doing that cover reveal and I'm really incredibly excited about it. It's going to be awesome. And again, thank you all for coming. I hope you all have a wonderful night. There's a quick question from Andre. Where will you be doing your cover reveal? I'm going to be doing it on all my social media platforms.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rob. This was great. Who's doing the reading of your of the audio?
A real narrator, not me. I do try my best, but a guy named Zach Aleman, who's phenomenal. I've heard his stuff, and I'm extremely excited about him doing it because he's one of these narrators. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and I love it. I don't know about everybody else, but I love it when the narrators really put emotion into it. And I think that's one of the benefits of audiobooks, because you're sort of bridging the entertainment gap, I guess, between reading and actually watching a movie or something like that. So I like when people do that, and he does do that. So it's going to be pretty cool. I think so.
Oh, great. Oh, well, thank you so much. I thought this was fantastic, and we had a nice crowd, and I thought you were great. So thank you. Happy to meet you and happy to have you here.
Thank you, Yvette. I hope everyone has a wonderful night. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you very much.